And we are live.
Thank you. So this evening's meeting is an in-person attendance, I'm going to start again. In-person attendance is not permitted at this meeting of the Community Affairs and Planning Committee. This meeting will be live streamed for viewing at www.ajax.ca/live. Electronic participation is permitted pursuant to Council's procedure bylaw. So I will call this meeting to order and would like to begin with this meeting with acknowledging that the land on which we gather is situated within the traditional and treaty territory of the Mississaugas. More specifically, the Mississaugas of Scugog Island, First Nation, signatories of the Gunshot Treaty of 1788 and the Williams Treaties of 1923. This land is and will continue to be home to the Indigenous peoples. Let us acknowledge the mistakes and traumas of the past through authenticity and support truth and reconciliation. Let us engage and celebrate Indigenous communities by being leaders of action in acknowledging the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples and the Truth and Reconciliation Commission's recommendations towards truth and reconciliation. Let us keep these principles close as we continue towards truth and reconciliation and as we move forward with kindness and respect as a community. Thank you. So I would like to move forward with the adoption of the minutes, and I have a resolution here moved by Councillor Lee, Regional Councillor Lee, and seconded by Regional Councillor Crawford. Are there any comments or questions? All in favor? Any opposed? That's carried. And Mr. Clerk, are there any delegations for the public meeting this evening?
No, there are not.
Thank you. So I would like to turn this over, I assume, to our Director of Planning, Mr. Romanowski, on 4.1, Bill 13 and Bill 109, the planning process changes.
Yes, thank you, Councillor Dyes, for the introduction. I'll turn it over to Sean McCullough, Supervisor of Policy, Planning and Research, for the presentation this evening.
Thank you.
All right, good evening, everyone. And I'm hoping that everybody's seeing the correct presentation this evening. My name is Sean McCullough. I'm the Supervisor of Planning Policy and Research here at the Town of Ajax. And good evening, Madam Chair, members of the committee. Tonight, I'm here to discuss a variety of changes that staff have had to undertake in response to Bill 109. So Bill 109 is the More Homes for Everyone Act. It was introduced on March 30th, 2022. And the bill received royal assent on April 14th, 15 days prior to the end of the 30-day consultation period. An amendment to the Planning Act that was strongly opposed by the town was a requirement to refund development application fees for official plan and zoning bylaw amendments, as well as site plan applications if a decision was not made within the statutory timelines. So on the screen before you is a table illustrating of when fees would be required to be refunded, and this is outlined in the Planning Act. As the town has commented before, existing application timelines are unrealistic due to the complex nature of developments and delays from applicants. Staff have had to carefully examine our development process, make adjustment, and update policy and bylaws. It's currently projected that in 2023, $978,000 in application fees could be at risk. As this is just a projection, it could be higher if there's a significant increase in application volume. These fees contribute to a functioning planning and development department, and without them, the taxpayer would be required to fund the development review process. Now, this change is currently scheduled to begin on January 1st, 2023. However, recently, late last week, we did receive a letter from the minister indicating that it may be delayed 6 months to July 1st, 2023. Now, as a result of some of the process changes, I also just want to mention Bill 13, and this also forms the basis for some of the recommendations today. So this was another omnibus bill that was passed in December 2021, and it made amendments to the Planning Act to allow council to delegate the approval of minor zoning bylaws to staff or the Committee of Council. And I'll discuss just what those mean in a moment. Now, in order to mitigate the potential financial impacts, staff have identified many policies, bylaws, and internal processes or documents that require updating. Tasks were prioritized into high, medium, and low priority, with the high priority items requiring approval by council prior to January 1st. And that's why I'm here this evening. I'll go over the other items in a few moments. First, I just want to discuss some of our changes that we're incorporating into our process to strive to meet the timelines. So we're proposing a new two-phase pre-consultation process, and I'll get into more detail shortly. We'll also be looking and offering an optional application review. So this is intended to provide an opportunity to applicants should they want their materials reviewed in their entirety or some of their more complex documents ahead of complete application. We're also implementing a new zoning bylaw compliance certificate that would be required prior to submitting a site plan or zoning bylaw amendment. We're working on enhanced terms of reference for all of our studies and reports. There'll also be more rigid application intake. So there will be a new applicant intake meeting where we can meet with the applicant to discuss their materials, ensure that everything is there, as well as an internal intake meeting where our staff will review the materials in some detail to ensure that all of the issues have been addressed. Now, unfortunately, there won't be any more open house meetings, and I'll describe those shortly as well, but statutory meetings will continue, and that's similar to the statutory meeting that we're holding this moment. No more processing applications concurrently. So historically, staff have encouraged zoning bylaw amendments and site plans to run concurrently to kind of align them. But unfortunately, due to the timelines, that can no longer happen. And finally, we're proposing more extensive use of holding provisions as well as conditional site plan approval. Now, in the report package, there's just a flow chart indicating how our process is intended to work. The red items are either new or amended steps, so shifting of some steps to other locations, things that happened previously within the actual application review are just being brought forward a little bit earlier. Then also the expanded use of some of the tools that we intend through the holding and the conditional site plan approval. Now, for official plan amendment, we've had to bring forward a technical amendment to expand some items. Now, before I start, I want to explain what a complete application is. Now, applicants are required to submit materials and information identified in the Planning Act and regulation. This could include certain plans, basic information, and a fee. The Act also allows the town to ask for other materials needed by the municipality, but they need to be identified in the official plan. So these could include things like traffic studies, stormwater management plans, environmental impact studies, to name a few. An application will be deemed complete once all materials required by the town is submitted. And once it's submitted, that's when the statutory timeline, or you also refer to it as the clock, starting. Previously, this only applied to official plan and zoning bylaw amendments, as well as draft plans and subdivision. Now, Bill 109, that was one item that they did allow. They allow municipalities to extend site plan complete application requirement to site plan, but we're updating our official plan to allow that to happen. Now, historically, staff would check to see if the document was there and would circulate for review to evaluate if all the issues had been addressed, and the town and the applicant would go back and forth. This quality and issue assessment would take place before an application is deemed complete, and that's the process we'll have to go forward. The statutory timelines have always existed. The only difference was that it was up to the applicant to appeal if they felt that their application wasn't moving forward. Delays often occur on the application side, as it can take months or even years for an applicant to resubmit their materials. Now that municipalities have to refund, it would actually incentivize an applicant to delay that resubmission. The old process allowed the applicant and the town to work together through issues, and the applicant would resubmit the materials. Under this new process, this opportunity to resubmit materials simply won't be there during the actual processing at the application, and that's why we're proposing to bring a lot of that forward. Now, as I mentioned, official plan amendment will extend the complete application requirements to site plan. And then it would also add policy to enable council to delegate the approval of what I referred to earlier as minor zoning bylaw amendments. Now, this includes the removal of a holding provision. So this is a tool that only council can apply to a property, and it typically occurs when you're considering a zoning bylaw amendment. It requires an applicant to fulfill certain conditions, such as finalizing a study or entering into an agreement. Currently, a separate bylaw would be forwarded to council to lift the holding provision at a later date. Now, if approved, this amendment would enable staff to lift holding provisions after they've confirmed that all conditions have been fulfilled, and it would streamline that component of the process. And the item that we're including at the same time is the temporary use bylaws to permit temporary use of land, building, or structure for up to 3 years. There can also be extensions of 3-year periods. The official plan identifies that this can be used for use such as temporary housing or accommodations, tourist use in facilities, parking lots, or events, provided that certain criteria, such as that it's temporary in nature and it doesn't require the extension of services. In the past, an example of this tool was the Pan Am parking lot for the Pan Am Games. Now, this amendment would allow staff to approve temporary use bylaws only if it met the criteria and provided that there was no objection received during a consultation period. If an objection was received, it would be forwarded to council for final approval. Now, finally, the amendment updates also update lists and studies and reports that are required for site plan approval. We're also updating the list to include items that are required by provincial policy, consolidate reports that are located elsewhere and identified in other policies in our official plan currently. We're also a report that we hope will promote public consultation, as well as clarify existing studies that may have multiple steps and make it easier to understand. We'll also allow for technical studies to be peer reviewed prior to the submission to the town where the town doesn't have that in-house expertise. Staff note that one resident did comment on the official plan amendment and objected to the approval being delegated to staff. However, after follow-up, no further details were provided as to why they felt that way. The region has also supported the amendment and just had some clarification questions. And then we also received the build letter, which I'll talk at the end of the presentation as well. Now, in addition to the official plan amendment, there's also other bylaws that we require to be updated. So the pre-consultation bylaw was updated to reflect the 2-stage pre-consultation process. So the phase 1 consultation will operate similar to the current process and allow the applicant and staff to work together to identify issues and application requirements. We would also work with them to finalize terms of reference for all the required studies and reports. Phase 2 will enable staff to work with the applicant to review some of the more technical reports and navigate the issues together. We've also included transition policies that are described in the staff report for those who have already pre-consulted with the town. We're also updating the delegation of authority bylaw, and this is just being updated to delegate authority to the director of planning or their designate to remove the holding provision or approve a temporary use bylaw that I mentioned earlier. Bill 109 also amended the Planning Act, requiring site plan to be delegated to staff, and this was an item that took effect back on July 1st. As council is no longer permitted to pull delegate authority, we've just included a minor technical amendment to reflect that language change and just remove that piece. Staff are also currently working with Watson Associates on a development application, approval application process fee analysis. This examines all associated time with processing an application and recommends fees for those application processes. It's expected to be completed in February. As an interim step, staff have introduced new fees for processes that previously did not exist based on preliminary analysis from Watson. All fees will be updated to reflect the new process in early 2023. The refund policy was also updated to reflect timelines and provide an opportunity for an applicant to withdraw by providing a partial refund. Finally, the council procedural bylaw has also been updated to more easily allow planning applications to proceed to council. This would mean that the statutory meeting would instead take place at council. This just provides staff with more opportunities and options to bring an application forward to ensure that we're meeting those timelines. And now planning applications have always been allowed to come to council, and they have in the past, and this just provides some additional clarity. Now, finally, moving forward, Bill 109 makes it difficult for the town, the development community, residents, and our partner agencies to work together during the actual processing of an application. Therefore, these changes aim to allow more opportunity during pre-consultation and before an application is submitted to work together. Updated terms of reference should benefit both the town and the applicant to improve the quality of the submission. As the quality of submission will be more thoroughly reviewed at the onset, we do expect some pushback, but staff need to be thorough and diligent in order to meet the timelines. Now, through this process, staff have been able to work internally to try and find efficiencies and continue to improve. And this also aligns well with our recent improvements with the team pod structure that were brought forward by Director Romanowski 2 years ago. Now, under Bill 109, as I mentioned, there's going to be limited opportunity to consult with the public due to the timelines. Historically, the town went above and beyond the Planning Act requirements and held open house meetings to consult with residents. And based on the timelines, we just can't make this work. But we are looking for a lot of opportunities to continue to encourage public consultation because it's an important part of the process. So we're in the public consultation strategy report, terms of reference that we'll be requiring is to better define and will encourage developer-led engagement sessions. Now, these are items that have become more common practice in the industry, and more municipalities are having developers hold their own public consultation meetings before they submit. And this will be strongly encouraged under this regime. Staff will explore more opportunities to use IMO to try and generate more feedback, whether it's through surveys or better commenting tools or any other ideas that members of council might have. Staff have also been working with the town GIS staff on a public-facing development tracking mapping tool to help residents find information on projects within their neighborhood. And this will be launched in early 2023. Finally, staff will work with economic development communication staff to educate the business and development communities, as well as the general public on these process changes. So as I mentioned earlier, I note that there was a letter received from Build in response to our process changes, outlining concerns with the removal of concurrent application processing, conditions, new fees, and wanting more CAP meetings. Now, under the new process, the timelines don't align with one another and the concurrent application processing can't occur. Fees reflects new processes, and moving forward, there'll be no subsequent reviews during the actual processing of the application. Staff have taken this as an opportunity to improve our process, and we do expect the same level of willingness to improve on the development community side. And staff are not finished. We continue to work on internal process changes and updating documents. This has been a large undertaking with help from almost every member of staff in the P&D section, as well as staff from the clerk's department, communications, and finance have all been integral to this. And as we move forward, we'll be continuing to update our terms of reference, updating at new and creating new application forms, creating a refund process internally, as well as a communication strategy. And then we'll be turning our attention to updating our work instructions, our Amanda processes, and launching the GIS tracker that I mentioned. We'll also have to evaluate this process against Bill 23 to see what other additional changes we'll have to make. But at the moment, there's only a couple of things that I think will directly impact us that we'll have to think about. And with that, I hope that council will approve these recommendations this evening, and staff will continue to monitor and strive to constantly improve. So thank you for the time this evening.
Helps if I undo the mic. Thank you for your presentation. I had a question from Councillor Tyler Moran.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And thank you, Mr. McCullough, and everyone on staff who have obviously been sort of saddled with this and just a sledgehammer, if you will, but thank you so much for all your attention to it and trying to sort of mitigate and help us mitigate. So I just wanted to ask on page 7, where it says no more open house meetings, I believe it's page 7. And then it says allow on page 18, it says allow statutory public meetings for planning applications at council. And then you just mentioned, which was kind of interesting at the very end of your presentation, engagement meetings. What was that called? You referred to as engagement.
Yeah, the developer-led engagement meetings.
Okay, development led, right. So those are, so just for the benefit of myself and anybody else listening. So the public open houses that we would go to, like local community center or local school and see the layout, like those are not happening anymore with this new bill moving forward in our community, correct?
So through the chair to Councillor Tyler Morin. So that's correct. So historically, staff went above and beyond, and we would hold those informal community meetings where everyone would come to the community center. We could present and answer questions. So unfortunately, we will not be able to hold those. But the statutory meetings where residents can be delegates on the agenda and speak to the application, those will still be required and those will still continue. Now, under this process, though, we will be requiring developers to produce a public consultation strategy report. And what that report, and this is a report that's identified in regulation, we will be requiring that they identify who their target audience is, what steps they've taken to communicate and consult with the public, what they heard during those meetings, and what steps they've taken to incorporate comments into their design. This is something that's being encouraged across municipalities across the GTHA. And the ones that in my report I spoke, Oakville is a good example that's been doing this for a couple of years with those developer-led meetings. And they've been pretty successful with uptake on those as well.
So there is a public component that can participate in a statutory meeting, albeit in a more formal setting rather than being in a community hall where we're walking around. But so we could tell our residents that ultimately, if they want to speak to a new development, they're still able to do that through a special council meeting, or sorry, not to call it special council meeting, but whether it's a community affairs and planning meeting or statutory meetings, is that correct?
Through the chair, that's correct. And I would still continue to encourage them to provide comments on IMO, because that helps us identify what some of those concerns are.
Okay, and then ultimately, the developer-led community meetings or open houses, that's another component that they would either offer or we could request or staff could request, correct?
So through the chair to Councillor Tyler Morin, so that's something that would happen before they've actually submitted their application. And unfortunately, the Act doesn't actually give us the ability to require it, so we will be strongly encouraging it. And I do think a lot of the development community, they do see the benefit in holding those, and we have actually had developers host those themselves in the town in the past.
Okay, thank you very much for the three sort of answers to the three components there. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Crawford, Regional Councillor Crawford.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you for this report. I'm wondering if you could let everybody know who BUILD is, in case people might be listening and not know who that organization is. Could you just explain that for me?
Certainly, through the chair to Councillor Crawford, so that's a good point. So BUILD is a organization that represents all the developers, or many developers across Southern Ontario, and they are their advocates for various matters, for planning, development related matters for the province or across the province.
So they must be very busy with Bill 109 and Bill 23.
I'd imagine.
I believe
so.
BUILD was also the one that advised the province that they should audit our reserves, is it not?
Through the chair, I believe it was them or a similar organization.
Yeah, okay, thank you. So does this particular Bill 109, does it affect only future developments, or does that affect development that is kind of in the queue now?
So through the chair, Councillor Crawford, so that's a good question. So this new refund timeline, as it stands today, would begin for applications that are submitted on or after January 1st.
Okay.
We have gone through our pre-consultation process, because as you can imagine, there's a lot of lead time for going from pre-consultation to application. So we've built some transition pieces. But as I mentioned, we did receive a letter from the minister last week indicating that they're proposing to shift this process to applications submitted on or after July 1st of next year. However, we haven't seen that to date.
Okay. So this format has always been the statutory open kind of public meeting, always has been that way. And the other open houses, is that what you were saying? I thought that was part of that act. It's actually something that we take one step further for better public consultation. Is that what I'm understanding?
So through the chair to Councillor Crawford, that's correct. We're currently only required to do open house meetings for official plan. Like when we as the town are establishing a new official plan, there's a requirement for that. But when there's amendments, those were an added step that the town undertook, and it was definitely a beneficial step.
Okay, all right, and we won't be able to do that. I'm just wondering, with all these changes on both of these bills, what does that mean for staffing in the planning department? You're probably not, this is probably more directed to Director Romanowski. Do we need to hire more people to get through this process faster? I know we've had some, I mean, like everyone else in the world, having staffing issues, but or not enough staff. But anyway.
Well, I mean, sure, more staff would be great. As I told council last year, this time last year, 100% of staff complement does not get 100% of the work done.
Yeah.
That's still, those are facts. But as Mr. McCullough mentioned, the changes to the process that are being proposed tonight through this amendment, through some of the other amendments to the bylaws that are required to facilitate this process actually mesh really well with our team pod structure that we've put together within our department.
Can you explain that? Can you explain that team pod? Yeah,
for sure. And definitely going to be something that we'll update council on as we go forward through Bill 109 and 13 and 23. But we adjusted how we review applications based on a team pod structure, meaning we've created 5 teams that have dedicated planning, engineering, transportation, and urban design components to each of the teams, and assign applications based on complexity, priority, standard review versus expedited review, higher political or public priority versus what. There's a number of scenarios, and we use that to our advantage in order to ensure that a team's working on it, as opposed to one planner sending it, a group of planners sending it all out to one engineer or one landscape architect or one transportation person. So we're kind of we've been working on it for a while. Now we finally got our full staff complement almost, and we're starting to run some stats and collect statistics and recognize some trends. And I think it pairs quite well with kind of the expectations of Bill 109 and the timelines that they've put out. And I think we can definitely use our team pod process with the timelines that the province has gifted us, and kind of see where we land and adjust our process accordingly, which Sean alluded to in his presentation. So just trying to be lean and nimble, and trying to be as reactive as possible and to the applications that are before us, and just put everything in the right lane when it comes time. And that's really what the team pod process has kind of set out to try to accomplish.
Excellent. Thank you very much. I appreciate your answers. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Mayor Collier.
Madam Chair. Sorry.
You're next, Mayor Collier, and then Councillor Bauer and Councillor Henry. Thank you.
I was just going to ask if you had seen my hand or my text message I sent you, because I did. Thank you, Chair. Just a few questions. Councillor Crawford touched on first. Those applicants we already have, you said will be under the old rules, but do we foresee them withdrawing and reapplying under the new rules under Bill 23?
So through the chair to Mayor Collier, I think a lot of developers are hesitant to do that even. I think a lot from what we've heard from many, a lot do like the old process and especially the good developers because it still gives them that opportunity to work through the issues with staff and try to figure out how they can resolve some of those items. I'm not to say that it's definitely not a possibility that we could see some developers if that's the case that they want to go forward with. But certainly in that case, we probably would have already seen some of their materials and would understand what the challenges and the issues are. And hopefully they've already been kind of resolved. So those other developers are hopefully far enough along though that they would be in their best interest to continue forward.
Okay, I just don't want to see, I don't want to see much of that. I mean, they've already paid their fees. I don't know what the rules are. If they pull out and cancel, I'm sure they get some back, but I think they should still keep moving forward. So hopefully they do. I wanted to ask, as far as, let me just pull up my notes here. So during the phase 1 and the phase 2, you're going to split the pre-consult up into 2. At what point do the planning fees get paid? I assume under the phase 2 when the clock starts.
So through the chair to Mayor Collier, so there would be fees related to both the phase 1 pre-con. There would be a fee that individuals would pay at that stage. There would be a fee that they would pay at stage 2 for those that choose to go forward with their application. And then there would also be a fee when they actually submit their application. And when we do get through the DAP analysis, a lot of that will kind of balance out to shift components to where it needs to be based on the staff time and the resources going into each of that step.
Okay, so they're still paying for the staff time for the pre-consults 1 and 2. And once they have their complete application under OPA 71, if approved, that's when the clock starts.
That's correct.
Okay. This new list of reports and peer reviews, who decides what is going to be required by each application and at what stage in the process, phase 1, phase 2, or the final is that made and told to the applicant? Now, just what I don't want to see, because I've been pushing hard to cut the red tape and move forward, and we've done a great job. And some of the things in Bill 109, for instance, about revamping the planning department, we've already done with the new team pods, and we're already ahead of the game there. What I don't want to see is just a standard list of every policy and study under the sun given to every application, because I think that will actually make a slow process slower and more expensive.
So through the chair to Mayor Collier, then that's a good point. I think as part of this process, collectively staff, we've looked at this as an opportunity to streamline some of those elements. And for the challenges that it does give us, we've been able to look at the glass half full and identify some of those opportunities. Now, because there are components that we're decoupling where we can no longer run a site plan and a zoning bylaw amendment application together, it allows us to identify, sit down and think, okay, what studies are required to make a decision on a zoning application? What studies are required to make a decision on a site plan application? And then which pieces can be moved to a condition, be finalized during conditions? So it allows us to better plan out when those pieces would be coming forward. And I think through this process, you will see more, direct comments and working with individual during that pre-consultation stage to make sure that we are getting to the end result. And I think that there could be some positives on that side of things.
Okay, but you didn't answer my question with regard to, is there going to be just a standard list given to every applicant, or who decides and when, or what each one is going to be required to submit?
Yeah,
Well, through the chair to Mayor Collier, just building on what Mr. McCullough already said, I mean, the list has to be exhaustive in case we need to ask for a particular report or study. The list does not mean we're asking for every single report and study every single time. We use our discretion. We work with our partner agencies through the pre-consultation process to ensure that we hone in on that exact report and study that we need and work with them to carry out that study in a way that's acceptable to us so that when it is submitted and we deem it complete, we have the comfort, the confidence that that study and report's achieving all of our objectives. But no means is it where we just say, here's a list of 47 studies, you have to submit that, and that's the same for everybody. That's not the intention of the process.
So let me ask a real live scenario. There's an applicant that applied for demolition permit. We were told them that it's probably better for you to wait till Bill 23 comes into place because under Bill 23, it'll probably be quicker and easier for you to move ahead. Two things. One, now Bill 23 might not come into play till June, you said, Sean, or was it July? And second, I mean, now would that same applicant that has been told since they haven't applied yet to wait, now all of a sudden have to do a heritage study and have it peer reviewed and do all these other extra things now?
So through the chair to Mayor Collier, I think you are referring to Bill 23, and that's not the subject of this report this evening.
I understand.
Yeah, Bill 109 is the component in terms of the process that will be moving forward.
But with OPA 71, Sean, sorry to interrupt, but I'm just saying we've given direction to wait for this Bill 23, but now with OPA 71, we could be actually increasing the workload.
So through the chair to Mayor Collier, we are actually not increasing the workload. So if you're referring to the heritage studies that are being added, we're not actually adding heritage studies. Currently, we have the Heritage Impact Study, and that one is all encompassing. And the challenges that we've had in the past is that there are 3 distinct steps within that study that people can often confuse. And in some cases, they may not need to go beyond step 1 if the dwelling is determined that it doesn't have significance and it doesn't meet that criteria that's outlined in the Ontario Heritage Act, which are being proposed to be changed under Bill 23. So by just clarifying this, we hope that it will provide better clarity and transparency to those applicants to understand what those 3 distinct steps are, and it'll help staff kind of guide them in that process.
Okay. You brought up a very important point, which is not being able to do site plan with zoning concurrently. And the province's quest is to make, the planning process go through quicker and smoother and have more houses, whatever, quicker. But it sounds like this is going to have the opposite effect. If we can no longer do concurrent processes, now they have to wait for the zoning to be completely done before they can start site plan, which technically may make the process longer. Is that correct understanding?
Yeah, through the chair to Mayor Collier, that's correct. Essentially, the way the timelines are scheduled, you've got 90 days to approve a zoning, but you've only got 60 days to approve a site plan. The issue is we can't approve a site plan unless it complies with zoning. Otherwise, we're predetermining what that outcome might be. So that's the challenge why we've had to separate those 2.
And it's an unintended consequence, but again, it's an important consequence. I wonder. I'll just touch on the bill letter quickly.
Mayor Collier, if I may, Mayor Collier, just to jump in there and through the chair to Mayor Collier, the advantage we have in Ajax is that a lot of our zone properties are pre-zoned and pre-designated. So council's familiar with us bringing OPAs and ZBAs forward, which you still have the authority over, but they're more technical in nature type of applications. So it's just, we can't put them together because of the 90 and the 60 days, and you can't do 90 and 60 because it just doesn't work out that way. So I just wanted to add that point too, that our OPAs and ZBAs for the most part are more technical in nature. And it still doesn't allow us to activate the site plan any earlier.
Okay. I just want to touch on the build letter quickly. I did read it. I did give it exactly as much consideration as they've given all of our concerns and comments with regards to a number of other matters. And I have no concerns with that letter and what we're dealing with tonight. one final thing, and that's to do with delegated authority. So you're asking for delegated authority on temporary uses. I wonder, can you please clarify exactly what council is responsible for as far as the planning process at the municipal level? Because more and more things, site plan approval, for instance, Bill 109 delegates to staff. It's more and more being taken out of our hands, yet the optics of the public is we are fully in control of it. Can you just outline exactly what is left for council approval at this stage once these changes come into place? Because it's not much.
So through the chair to Mayor Collier, so that you're still involved with most planning, like the larger planning decisions. So you'd still be responsible for approving our official plan, approving official plan amendments brought forward by applicants, approving our zoning bylaw and zoning bylaw amendments, draft plans of subdivision would continue to remain with you. And then the items that we're bringing forward this evening too, as we mentioned, the holding provision has always been more of a technical exercise. It's just confirming that they've already finalized conditions that were already established by council. And then the temporary use piece, if there still is objections by the public, that would still flow through council, and there would still be the opportunity for council to make that decision if the public was unhappy with that proposed temporary use.
Fair enough. Thank you very much. Those are my questions. Thank you, Chair. Thank you, staff.
Thank you, Mayor Collier. Councillor Bauer.
Thank you, Chair. Good evening, Mr. McCullough, Director Romanowski. Thank you very much. First, I want to acknowledge the amount of effort and work and pain and suffering that went into the creation of this report and presentation for us. And Mr. McCullough, you said something earlier regarding the willingness to improve from both the planning side and hopefully the development side. And I think with the amount of pressure and change that is being thrown at you over the last many years, and then now even more so, to have such an optimistic and go get 'em attitude is wonderful. And I thank you for that. It's just amazing. And that flow chart is awesome. The amount of work that went into that. So I do have some questions about, so first of all, the 978,000 of potential loss, is that based on, let's say the town doesn't meet the deadlines on all of these applications? How did that come up, that number?
So through the chair to Councillor Bauer. So first off, thank you. Yes, so that's just based on our projected revenue for 2023, and that just assumes that we wouldn't make the decision on any of the applications within the time frame. But of course, with this process, we are hoping that the goal is to meet those time frames and to hit that first decision date and hopefully not have to refund anything. But there still, of course, is always risk and issues and things like that. But that's how that was calculated. It's just assuming that all the projected revenue, and we could end up getting more applications than are projected. We could end up getting less. Every year it is a bit of a challenge to kind of identify exactly how many applications we might get and what those costs might be, because we have different fees and different application types. But that's the best projection that we can give at this time.
Okay, thank you for that. And then my question about the clock, the start and stop of the clock. So I understand, and I think it's a great idea to have all of the preliminary work and pre-consultation and all of the necessary back and forth so that the complete application, when it's submitted and the clock starts, is about as complete as it can be. So let's say though, there's something within that application once the clock starts that is not complete. There's more information needed, or there's some provision that, okay, maybe it's a town delay, so I could see the clock continuing, counting down. But let's say it's the development side that it's missing something, or there's an error or delay on that end, or the H provision is based on them responding to things. If that is left to delay at the development side, does the clock stop?
So through the chair to Councillor Bauer. So no, in the past, what staff have actually recommended is the ability to stop the clock when we either respond to their application or get the materials back. But under the way that everything is currently framed, once the clock starts, once staff or the town have deemed an application to be complete, there's only two ways it's going to stop. One is going to be if the applicant withdraws their application, if there's an issue, and they can try to revisit and try to address that issue. Or it's going to be once council makes a decision, and whether that's a favorable decision or a non-favorable decision, that remains to be seen.
Okay. So there's a lot of, so that makes perfect sense as to why the new steps in the pre-phase have been created and implemented. It's like going to the doctors. You want to, you have a very short time, so they want you to bring your health card, all the list of medications you're on, other referral specialist information, et cetera, so you're ready and prepared, so and you don't miss anything. So that makes sense to me. Most of my questions were asked previously. I do want to comment on the public consultation strategy report. I think it is so important. We hear now, even with, a voluntary open house held by planning staff, plus the mandatory public meeting, still not enough. And residents say, we didn't get consulted. We didn't have enough time. So I think pulling back on one of those by no fault of the town of Ajax, is dangerous. It's, we're missing that opportunity to really reach the folks. So I think the communication strategy that you will plan is very, very important. So I know it's in the report, but maybe you could just talk a little bit more about that, please.
So through the chair to Councillor Bauer, I just want clarification. Were you referring to the requirement to complete the community consultation strategy report by the applicant, or the communication strategy that staff will work with economic development and communications on?
So a little bit of both. Like, I guess the strategy report is important because we need to make sure that communication is the top of the list for both the applicant and the town, but maybe more so on the town side with the strategy for ECD and communications and planning, please.
Yep. So thank you very much. So yes, on the development side first, there would be that requirement for the community consultation strategy report, and that's really to try to push some of that on to the developer to try and get the community engaged early on, get them thinking about what they can do their development to try and help and be a positive within the communities that they're going. On the other side, as I mentioned, yeah, so you're correct. So a consultation strategy on a lot of these changes is important. So we've had early conversations with economic development and Samuel, and working on a newsletter that we can provide to both the businesses as well as the development community that kind of outline what some of these changes are, and then working with communications on how we can get out and help the residents understand these changes and kind of what they can expect moving forward, and then still continue to find other ways that we can best engage them in this process.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Let me just make sure. Yeah, I think that's everything for now. Thank you very much. Again, appreciate the information.
Thank you. Councillor Henry.
Hi, through the chair. First, I'd like to thank staff for answering the many, many questions I had this weekend and as of today, in fact. Like Councillor Bauer, I've heard a lot from residents over time with regards to there wasn't enough transparency, there wasn't enough communication. We didn't know about this, we didn't know about that. So I did craft some emails today to get ahead of these questions, and staff has answered. So through the chair, I would just like to read a few of these for those at home that are listening, the folks at home. So we're now going to go ahead, if I understand this correctly, with more use on the IMO. Is that correct? For communicating to the folks at home with regards to any planning and in development in their areas, correct?
So through the chair to Councillor Henry, so that's correct. We currently do use IMO, but we definitely want to encourage more use so that we can try to identify what some of those concerns are early on.
Okay, so through the chair, some of my questions were within that thought process. So question 1, IMO, who uses it? What age demographic uses the IMO? Response from staff. Upon registration, users are asked for their name, ward, email, and phone number. We do not collect age of the users. Question 2, what language is IMO in? Staff response, IMO is offered in English. Many online browsers have translation services built in. Additionally, the town offers the Language Line program, which offers translation assistance to residents when they come to town hall or call with inquiries. Next question, how many people per year use IMO? Staff response, this year.
Point of order. This is not relevant to the report in front of us and the decision we're making tonight. Can you please ask Councillor Henry to stay on task? We're discussing the recommendations in the report.
So Councillor,
Well,
do you have any questions for staff regarding the report? All of us
do.
All of us have emails and questions that we also have, you know, beforehand, but tonight we can ask the questions of staff.
So, okay, I will ask this question of staff. Is the IMO, the tool that we're going to be using, how will it increase from the current amount of users of 1,147 registered users? And how will we know that we're hitting the targets in the neighborhoods we need to?
Are you able to answer that, Mr. Romanowski?
Can you repeat the question, please, Councillor Henry? So you had a question around the demographics and who we reach out to and the information that's collected in the background of the...
My understanding through staff is that, through the chair, is that currently we have 1,147 registered users of IMO. My understanding is that through this new process, we will be relying more heavily on the IMO app program to reach out to those in the community around certain developments. How will we know we've reached them?
I don't think we're using IMO to reach out to residents. I think we're using it as a platform to convey information about development applications in our community. And if people want to sign into IMO or follow our website or development notices, or sometimes we have bulletins that go out or newsletters that go out, they can register for IMO for a myriad of things. As for the statistics and the information in the background, I mean, that would not be my department. That would be through the CAO's department, through communications as kind of being the, I wouldn't say owners of the system, but they've created the system by which we use in order to convey our information out to the public. Sean, is there anything else McCullough that wants to add to that? Cassandra Cruciano is also online as well, in case we need any input there from her section. Go ahead, Sean.
Yeah, thanks, Jeff. And through the chair to Councillor Henry. So I just wanted to highlight that the IMO is only one of the tools that we're going to be continuing to try and promote and utilize more effectively. There still will be those other requirements where residents who are in the neighborhood of the development, there'll still be sign requirements to be posted on the property. There still will be notices that get mailed to residents within a certain perimeter around the development. There still will be postings in the Ajax News Advertiser of those developments coming forward as well. So I just wanted to highlight that those will still continue. It's just looking at how we can use IMO, and we would look to the counselors and our communications department to try and get the message out and promote that IMO page to direct some of your constituents to that page to provide early feedback, because that definitely helps staff.
Thank you.
And sorry.
Sorry, through the chair, it's Cass from the Office of the CAO. If you'll indulge me, I have a bit of additional context to maybe to help answer Councillor Henry's questions. So even though, we've noted that there's about 1,150 registered IMO users that can access information on IMO, those are just the registered individuals. There's anybody that goes or that is directed to the IMO page has access to the information that's included there. So to clarify, you don't need to make an account to access that information. And I think that, one of the takeaways is the loss of that public open house function does mean that, to Sean's point, that increasing our access points or points for residents to get this information is a focus, a renewed focus that we'll have. And so we have a variety of sources, and we're happy to share that information, kind of a full list of the ways that residents are made aware of these applications. But in cases where there are specific, posts on IMO or pages on IMO that are of unique in your wards, we of course would encourage councillors to share that information with residents, share the links to those pages. And also, as we do as corporately, we encourage residents to sign up for IMO, because it really is a great engagement tool. So if there's opportunities where council sees fit to encourage residents to register and share their voices and opinions on a potential project, council is more than welcome to encourage residents to do that as well as we do corporately.
Thank you, Cass. And I was just going to say that myself, Councillor Henry, we have these challenges that get the information out, and we always have these challenges. But now with these changes, it will be, I think, up to us councillors to include information when we have our ward meetings or Zoom meetings. So do you have any further questions?
I do have a follow-up question. What I've heard from a few residents already that they feel like they're losing something in the process. Is there anything in this process that they're losing an opportunity to communicate how they feel? For the chair?
Through the chair, I can defer to planning specifically, but my understanding is that other than the information that a resident could share at a public open house forum is no different than the information they could share elsewhere. So if you have an opinion, you can share that same opinion through a variety of the other forums, whether it's participation through IMO or by directly reaching out. Yes.
Councillor Henry, anything further?
No, thank you. Much appreciated.
Are there any further questions from council? Okay, seeing none.
I have my hand up for one follow-up question.
Regional Councillor Crawford, go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Really quickly, to staff, the LPAD, does it still exist? Is their powers been diminished in some form? Like, what is their function with all these bills now that have come out?
So through the chair to Councillor Crawford, so Bill 23 had a big impact on the Ontario Land Tribunal. The way it was originally structured was that third parties, so mostly residents, would not have any appeal rights to appeal an official plan amendment, zoning bylaw amendment, land division, or minor variance application. Now, when the bill did receive royal assent, 2 of those were pulled out. So residents can continue to appeal and third parties can continue to appeal zoning bylaw and official plan amendments, but they will not be permitted to appeal minor variance or land division applications.
Okay, thank you so much. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Crawford. Is there anything further? Well, I just wanted to say to staff how much I appreciated your report. It was very thorough and was really quite relieved to see some of the issues that you'd addressed and what you had come up with. And I know it's been a challenge. And I know that our staff have been working basically for the province now, all last term and now into this term. Hopefully it will end soon so we can catch up with these planning issues that we're behind on because of that. But I really want to say you did a really amazing job on this report. And thank you so much for all of your work. I know there was many staff people involved in this. So if there's nothing further, then I have a resolution on this motion, on a motion for Bill 13 and 109 on the process changes. Do you want me to read them out? Are you okay with that? Okay, I have a motion moved by.
Can we see it on the screen?
Sure. Mr. Clerk. So I can read it if you want, but the report entitled Bill 13 and Bill 109 Planning Process Changes in Town Initiated Official Plan Amendment Number 71 be received for information. That official plan amendment number 71 included as attachment 1 to this report be approved, and that the implementing bylaw be forwarded to the December 12, 2022 council meeting for approval. That council delegate authority to the Director of Planning and Development Services or their designate to approve the removal of a holding provision and the establishment or extension of a temporary use bylaw in accordance with the policies of the official plan, and that the delegation of authority bylaw includes attachment 2 to this report be forwarded to the December 12, 2022 council meeting for approval. The pre-consultation bylaw 51, 2019 be repealed, and the proposed new pre-consultation bylaw included in attachment 4 to this report be forwarded to the December 12, 2022 council meeting. That the interim amending bylaw to the Town of Ajax fees and charges bylaw number 54, 2022 be included as attachment 5 to this report, be forwarded to the December meeting for approval, and that the proposed bylaw to amend council procedural bylaw 34, 2022 included as attachment 6 to this report be forwarded to the December 12th council meeting for approval. So this resolution is moved by Mayor Collier and Councillor Tyler Moran. All in favor?
Sorry, I'd like to just
have
ask
a question.
Recorded vote, please. That's it.
We have a recorded vote, Mr. Clerk.
Thank you. On the motion, in favor or opposed, Regional Councillor Lee.
In favor.
Councillor Tyler Moran.
In favor.
Councillor Bauer.
In favor?
Mayor Collier.
In favor.
Regional Councillor Crawford.
In favor.
Councillor Henry.
In favor.
And Chair Dies.
In favor. Thank you. Anybody opposed? None. So that's carried. Thank you very much. So the last motion I have is for adjournment. So moved
Get the
by,
chair to read the resolution again, just because you have such a soothing voice, Joanne.
did I put you to sleep?
No, I was in a zone. It was like ASMR. Sorry,
No.
I'll stop down. Go ahead.
The motion is to adjourn. Moved by Councillor Lisa Bauer and Councillor Rob Tyler Moran. All in favor? Thank you. It's carried. And
Good
thank
job,
you,
Madam Chair.
everybody.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you,
Good job,
everyone.
Chair.